We've came far, came close, and here we are, the grace. As bright and beautiful as it is. What is the Elden Ring, and what does it entail? This is my journey to answer that very question. This is Elden Ring. Welcome back to the Proving Grounds, where another Souls game comes to be an Elden Ring. This is probably going to be a quite different project for review, because there's a lot of different things to go in about this, so I'm going to try and do my best to organize this, because I know I'm usually a disorganized mess when it comes to a lot of my thoughts on what's going on. Anyway, so Elden Ring, the newest Souls game. Now, just to give anyone new here an idea, I have played all but Sekiro. I played all the others: Demon Souls, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, and all the respective DLCs they may have had, if they had any at all. But I haven't played our little samurai Japanese adventure yet, because to be honest, pairing scares the living crap out of me. But anyway, Elden Ring. A lot of people have called Elden Ring Dark Souls 4, and I think that's a bit of a discredit to a lot of interesting mechanics, but at the same time, I can get some criticism that I've looked into before with the game. But I do obviously want to give my 2 cents on my adventure, which was 382 hours platinum it on PS4. So let's get into it. So first thing, I would like to discuss the biggest main thing about Elden Ring. It being open world. Immensely, I have to say, bravo. I think it's probably one of the most common things most people graduate with the game. I find that most people who really love the open world really hate most other open worlds, or have gone immensely tired of other open world games. And I think that's with very good reason. So the open world in FromSoft's title has a lot of things going for it. If you're very familiar with FromSoft's design of usually having objects and things that draw your eyes and be like, ooh, I want to go there, is something they've had since Demon Souls, and only expanded on more and more with every entry. And while some of those instances are smoke and mirrors with, like, say, I think a great example of smoke and mirrors with it is in Dark Souls 2. If you ever look at anyone who actually shows how the areas load and deload in when you're traveling now, many of the places you see from a distance don't match up from where the real instance of it loads in. So, but it still has that same illusion as like, hey, there's something there, and you join something like, hey, I'm there. That's much more literal here in Elden Ring, as you'll see many wonderful and amazing landmarks of places that are like, ooh, I want to go there, ooh, I want to go there, with the ever daunting Eden tree basically being visible from almost anywhere. It's pretty hard to find a spot where you won't be able to see the Eden tree to some extent. It looms over the entire world, as it is a very big focus and religious symbol of the storyline. But I think the bigger thing that FromSoft gives to the open world is more meaning. Now, I will be the, how should I say, the devil's advocate. And understandably, there are likely things throughout the series that people have went, oh wow, there's so much deep meaning in this way this looks here, and sometimes maybe that was never even the intent with some of the devs. Maybe they're like, oh, that was just some random corpses I put there. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are some instances of that, and being such a large world, I'm sure there are instances of that in Elden Ring. Because a lot of people are always like, oh, there's deep meaning in everything in all FromSoft's titles. And that might be giving a little too much credit. But I do feel like they definitely put a lot more passion into the environmental storytelling of their games. That is undeniable, though. And I feel like it is that kind of touch that brings a lot of fun and life to the world of the lands between in the game. It brings lots of fun exploration. Now, if you want to see lots of NPC, like, I think there's a very important thing you have to understand, splitting between how FromSoft's open world is between a lot of the usual kind from like Assassin's Creed and Elder Scrolls. Not Elden Scrolls, Elder Scrolls. Elden Ring. Anyway, I'll forever be cursed with that now. But Elden Ring still continues having a select handful of NPCs, and that they are things that you either have to devotedly look for or get lucky to run into at times. And being in a bigger world makes it easier to miss on NPCs. And if you need that constant interaction with quest givers and stuff, you will likely dislike Elden Ring. I think if you have a strong taste for Japanese aesthetics and design for games, you will like Elden Ring more. And if you want a stronger thing on tasks to be done in content, you will probably have mixed feelings on Elden Ring. You could still enjoy the game, but there could be a more likelihood that you might get annoyed or find it kind of empty if you don't feel that, how should I say, if you don't enjoy the story crafting idea, like trying to theorize what's going on or what happened here at this place, this environment tells me a story. If that type of thing doesn't interest you, you will probably find the land between feeling much more devoid, because one of the big aspects of really enjoying this open world doesn't interest you. So I think it is important to note that difference. So if you really like Assassin's Creed and Elder Scrolls, Elden Scrolls, Elden Ring, Elder Scrolls. Man, sometimes I really have to wonder if that was even like part of the naming for this game was the kind of dunk on scrolls. I don't really know. I have wondered that before. But I really enjoyed the game's open world. It's definitely a very high point in my opinion, and it brings a lot of good stuff to the table. So one of the interesting things I want to go in about the beginning experience of the game. So you'll start the game, you have the tutorial, you'll either win or lose, and you'll have to be killed and end up in your first place in the actual lands between. You'll get out of the underground area and you'll be in the open area. You'll be greeted by a man who will basically tell you to go to the castle you see in the distance. It's very prominent and very hard to miss, because the only other thing that's really prominent from that spot is the Eden tree itself, basically. So if you do classic Dark Souls, Demon Souls, you're going for what you're supposed to do, which is basically what I did in my beginning. You're looking for the way to get to that castle, and you'll go north and you'll find a cliff head, and following that cliff you'll find a gate area, and that gateway is a big road that's going to be filled with soldiers, traps, and ambushes and gank squads that will try to fucking take you out. But if you get through all that, you'll get to the beginning road that will take you to Stormveil Castle. But before you can actually go in, there exists one opponent, a boss, which, depending on whether you go into the open world and explore or go straight for the castle, could be your first boss. The Fell Omen will block your way, and he will fucking kick your ass. I got to him, I think the starting level for my class was 12? I didn't even level up, I don't think. I think I just stayed the basic level, and I got to him, and I didn't really have a whole bunch of trouble to get to him, but fucking fighting him was a nightmare. I had tried multiple times. I'm like, clearly, I cannot do this right now. Because he's essentially like one-shotting me, and he's kicking my ass. And bosses aren't normally meant to one-shot you in these games. You're meant to be able to fumble a bit and try to learn the boss. So, to me, based on past Souls games design, it was basically telling you, go away. And I find that a really interesting design. And also, I did forget to know, I actually forgot about, but with that, I actually remembered also, when you first enter the mainland of the land between after the tutorial, there's also a horseman, a world boss. There are world bosses in this that you can meet in the actual just open world itself. There was a horseman that's also between you and Stormveil, easily to avoid, but you can fight him also, and he will also likely hand you your fucking ass. And he is also another warning to fucking go and explore. Now, I immediately fucking avoided him. So I saw him, I'm like, no. So I didn't get that lesson with him. I actually was too smart about it, is the problem. But yeah, getting to the boss in front of Stormveil makes you, unless you're really, really good, realize you need to go and fucking start getting some stuff in your belt. So, from there, I start exploring the world. And I really love how the map is done. The map only has a small section of the land between them revealed, and as you explore outward or find warp points that take you to places out from where you are, the map will expand. And it just kept amazing me how much bigger the map kept getting. And I'm going to do my best to avoid showing the full map. If I do show any gameplay of my main save file, I want to avoid stuff like that, because I feel like that's an experience to try and see if you can figure out when this map is going to start growing. I want to not reveal as much. So like in a lot of these like examples and detail things, most of the stuff I'm going to try and focus in the main beginning portion of the lands between. So I want to try and stick to that, because a lot of the surprise, and again, I always feel like these type of games are best experienced blind your first time, and then you can start going into the things you missed and following a guide for that. But that's just me, you don't have to do that, but I feel like you get more out of the experience in that way. But that's just me. That's just me. Now, you might ask, what are things you can do in this open world? Because obviously, if there ain't a lot of NPCs and stuff to interact with, there's, like I said, basically the normal kind of lot you would have in a FromSoft title, then what is there to do in this open world? Well, there are different things. You can, of course, find merchants. Merchants Unlike big sprawling city merchants, you will find hiding merchants are hiding about. These merchants all offer different materials, items, and weaponry, arrows, and things that can be assist. Some are limited inventory, and others have infinite supply. And it's good to know what merchants that you're interested in, because getting those really good arrows restocked, really good, man, really good, really good. There's also lots more loot to be given. Now, I'm not going to go into all the new types of items right here. Like I said, I'm going to try and divide this up some. Kind of actually have this organized for once, So I want to try and stick to mainly the exploring at the moment. But there are several new items, and there are lots of both the usual kind of things of weapons and spells, along with some of the new type of items there are, and they are everywhere, and they are rewards for exploration, bosses, dungeons, and so on. Now, dungeons, there are lots of dungeons. Now, I feel like the dungeons are the evolution of the Chalice dungeons from Bloodborne. Unlike Chalice dungeons, though, they are not random. They are all set up the way they are. Some are more interesting than others. Be fair, many of the early ones are not very crazy, but there are some later ones that are either really fucking hard as hell, because somebody in the design team is like, oh, there's some interesting, clever, how should I say, 3D chest going on in a few of them. But overall, I would say a good chunk of the dungeons are kind of forgettable, but they're there for something to do, and they have many rewards, some more exciting than others. You also have Everjails. Now, Everjails are, I think, supposed to be a reference to being jails. From what I interpreted from things in them, these are creatures that are jailed away for varying reasons. Everjails can be found around the world, and you can wunzel right in and fight whatever the fuck's inside, and they all offer you a nice dandy reward. Of course, you can find this game's version of bonfires all over the places, the Graces. They are everywhere at entrances of dungeons, randomly in the openings, at the beginning of the main dungeons. They're all over the place, and you'll find many of them. You can also find telescopes. There's only a few I ever found. They give you big overhead looks and let you kind of look around the land, get an idea of some landmarks of interest. So those can be nice. You'll find different kinds of points of interest in runes. Runes generally have at least usually one chest in them. You can find some building shacks and such around. Some decapitated ruins and things that can have varying things. You can also find... So, here's how I would categorize the dungeon system. As far as I know, the game never has an actual naming convention for them. But here's how I like to refer to dungeons. You had the actual dungeons. Then you had minor dungeons, which are not necessarily main dungeons you have to do, but they can still have a little bit more than a regular dungeon. And then you have the main dungeons. These may still be optional, depending on what's... I haven't at this point fully looked up everything about the game, so I don't know what things are mandatory to 100% or not. But I would say the main dungeons are big plot, main unique boss figures that deeply have a connection to the story, is how I would label them. Apparently these type of dungeons have been referred to the community as legacy dungeons. But again, I don't know anywhere where any of these terminologies are being, officially endorsed anywhere. So I think they are just being picked up at that. Anywho, but yeah. You will find minor dungeons, which usually come in the form of large forts or castles. They are usually not anywhere on the scale of main dungeons or the quote-unquote legacy dungeons, but they are a little bit more involved than just a regular dungeon, because like I said, especially in the early portion, a lot of early dungeons are pretty short, to be honest. Later on, some of them can get a little bit more involved, though, but then you have the minor trees. So the minor trees, as you fill out the map, you'll see trees that aren't as big as the Elden tree, but they're very large trees themselves. Normally at these trees you will find a avatar of the Elden tree. These avatars guard tier items, which are used with a new item in the game. Again, I'll go over that when we get into items. There are multiple of them all over the world. Gotta catch them all. Pokemon! Yeah! You also find torches, which are generally safe places that give you a little extra lore. Just to throw this out, though, something I didn't realize until late game. Your companion who joins you early in the game as your quote-unquote, how should I say, your candle maiden type helper, she will divulge additional dialogue about things if you sit at the graces of most churches. So I'll throw that as a bone for those who want to get as much lore to them. But churches generally have some items of interest. So definitely recommended to go forth to Affiliation and beyond. You also have the towers. So there are multiple towers that you go later with the wounds that you get off of certain bosses. These towers are where you activate the wounds, and there are multiple throughout the world. You also have these kind of magical academy buildings. Some of them are simple to get in. Others have tricks that you have to either sneak in, figure out a riddle, understand some kind of magical hoopla to get in, and they usually either present you things for most mage type builds. So those are recommended definitely if you're into that degree. Now, a few of the minor dungeons are also like town areas. Now, there aren't any like actual traditional like town areas like you would find in most Western open world games, full of NPC, like, well, how should I say, non-hostile NPCs, I should say, technically. But a few of the kind of minor dungeons also kind of town little settings, but still, they're just infested with enemies and stuff, just things to kill you. But for the general, that pretty much covers most of what you'll find in the open world aspect of the game. There can be a few unique little locations that have warp points. Like, there was one that's really unique that's called the Full Balfleys that just has 3 warp points that will warp you to really crazy places in the world. But there are other places that have these kind of secret warp points that'll throw you to different areas. I think one that you'll find way to the south, I think it will take you way to the north, and it will give you a really big surprise on how big the map is if you want to find out. And there's still could be more. Oh, wait, there is another thing. The Wandering Mausoleums. These things I kinda don't like myself. I didn't use any of them, and that was my choice. They are something useful for those who want everything now. They allow you to duplicate remembrances, which are the equivalent of Elden Ring's boss souls. They allow you to make weapons, spells, and unique items. These mausoleums, if you get them knocked down, allow you to clone remembrances. I don't like the idea of them myself, because I feel like one of the special things about each of your characters, unless you go into New Game Plus, it ensures that your character will be a certain way and not necessarily always have everything. And I understand to some people that can be annoying, but I feel like it makes PvP killers more interesting, in my opinion. But if you've been annoyed by, damn, there's like 3 weapons I can't get, I have to go to New Game Plus game, you'll be happy to know you'll be able to duplicate a lot of those. Now, is there enough to duplicate all of them? I don't actually know. I don't really know. Like I said, I didn't actually use any of them. Actually, funnily enough, I didn't use any of the boss souls. I found a few things looked interesting, but I never committed to any of them because there was so much crap you always found in the open world itself. It was just bonkers crazy. But between exploring everywhere looking for dungeons that you'll find usually in little cramped areas along walls, cliffs, down dead-end path, like there's a lot of nicely hidden dungeons, and I like the design of a number of them, but they're all varied here and there. But overall, I feel like there's enough explorationable things. There could have been more interesting ideas, because outside of that, you just have the world bosses, which come in 2 flavors. The ones you see around the world naturally all the time, constantly day or night, or the secret world bosses. Woo! Now, secret world bosses, as far as I can tell, only pertain to nighttime. There might be some that pertain to daylight also. That's actually something I was interested in looking into to see if they... But the only bosses I ever noticed that would vanish from the open overworld would be ones that appeared during night. The most common and most likely one you'll ever see in the whole game is the Night Riders. These bosses are black knights riding in darkness, and they actually have a lot of interesting lore implications to them, but they all over the place. You can find multiple of them. So if there's anything you're likely going to at least see once, it's definitely them. Another nighttime boss I ran into are deathboards. Deathboards, I think I ran into 3 of them. I don't even know how many there are. Again, something I wanted to look into. I'd love to get the gigantic total of how many bosses are in this game, because there's no way I'm going to know even how many I've killed. I did platinum the game, so I likely killed the majority of them, I imagine. But still, who knows how few I may have missed. It's just bonkers there. But there are a few different nighttime bosses in the open world. And, I mean, that's about generally all there is when it comes to just exploring the open world itself outside of dungeons and that. Now, there are a few things that could help you. Like, there are these statues that will point at dungeons. There isn't one for every single dungeon, but there's a few noteworthy dungeons that have one that give you, like, go in this direction, you'll find a dungeon. There's a few little interesting things like that to help you kind of get about. But overall, you're really free to explore the world. It's actually kind of interesting, really, like... I don't want to, again, explain how expanded the map is exactly, but I do want to note that you don't have to go in the Stormvale at the beginning. You can actually get past Stormvale and keep going, exploring past Stormvale. So, just to give an idea of how much of the world it can let you explore, and considering what you need to get to further places, technically I think you could actually get even farther without having to kill any of the main bosses, probably. But that's getting into detail what you have to do to get further and further in, which, varies in that. I do love how there's also multiple paths to get into different places. I will mention there is multiple ways to get into the area where the capital is, which that's not a big spoiler because you all told about the capital. It's where the Elden tree is. So, yeah, that exists. Where it is, I'm not going to tell you, but there are multiple places to get to where the capital is, and it's very interesting. Some of them are easy, and other ones you have to explore some or get lucky or do certain things. And I like that. It gives you different options to get to different places now. So overall, I really do like the open world. I think they did a fantastic job designing all the areas. Now, it is important to note that there was a lot of copy and paste. Like, it's hard to make a gigantic world like this and not reuse some things. You will see runes, house structures, and things repeated throughout the land. A little bit of a shame, but to be honest, I think it's not as bad, especially being their first open world game. If they were to make another open world game and further expand on more unique structures and stuff from there, I think it definitely would be a good plus as well. I think that would be definitely a very good thing going forward if they were to make another one now. I definitely want to say I don't want all FromSoft games to become open world games. Maybe like every, I don't know, 2 other titles, maybe do another open world game or something. I liked it, but at the same time, I have to say, like, I think this particular topic comes down to one thing. Was it necessary, and what did it add to the game? I do feel like it helped add a lot to the story building of the world in that. A lot of times, you know, you don't get to thoroughly explore so much of the environments in previous titles. You have the corridors of the areas you're allowed in. There aren't a lot of really big open areas in previous titles. There's a few unique instances, but not too many. And it definitely brings a nice forte to the storytelling of the different cultures, the land, and the history of the world, giving different ways to tell the stories, and that through the environment, through the items, and through the actions of enemies, players, and NPCs. I really liked it in that aspect. But I can definitely see the argument where somebody could say if they had maybe cut, I don't know, 50% of the game out, made it a little more condensed open world, or just made it more like the other Souls games where they interlinked most of the legacy dungeons together with a few of these other things and scarce between that. A lot of people, I've seen the argument of some of the things I've read and looked at of people saying, you know, would that have been a much better game? It's very subjective. At the end of the day, it's very subjective depending on people. I think Elden Ring's open world is a very welcomed, different thing outside of the other Souls formulas of Bloodborne, Dark Souls, and I'm going to lump Demon Souls with the Dark Souls-esque of its type of gameplay. Again, haven't played Sekiro. A lot of people have apparently said a lot of the bosses feel like they come from that game because they're a lot more combo heavy. And ooh, boy, with no shield, that's gonna make me nervous if I ever get to wound up playing that game. But I enjoyed the open world. I definitely don't want every FromSoft game to become this, though. But I wouldn't mind every few games to see another take on an open world game. Because, to be honest, at this point, I think this is one really good open world game I really enjoyed. Because a lot of times, I just hate a lot of the quests in these games. Finding, oh, can you go kill the ants down the road? They're harassing me and that. And like, for every like 10 quests, they're like, oh, go kill a bunch of something and I'll give you some gold. There's maybe 1 or 2 really interesting little quests that involve a lot of mystery in that. But a lot of Western open world games just feel like they're full of all kinds of dribble to me. But that's just me. Just me. But if you're in that kind of boat, I definitely would say give Elden Ring a try for its open world differences, because it's definitely different in a lot of ways. And the last thing I would like to go in about the open world topic is, of course, something I didn't talk about at all yet, is Torrent. one of the new mechanics. And I want to bring it up here because, well, Torrent obviously is very important to the open world aspect. Because it's a fucking, well, I mean, it's actually a goat, but it's your horse to go through the lands between. Now, it's not usable literally everywhere, but in the main open world area, it is usable. And a few boss arenas even let you use Torrent, but that can vary from place to place. But Torrent is very useful for travel, obviously, because it's obviously a lot fucking faster than you are. And Torrent, oddly enough, can jump twice, where you can jump once, which is important to note that jumping is its own devoted button now, instead of being a weird system of either using the roll button or clicking in your analog stick. And, you know, analog stick click or heel, I find that a lot more accurate than trying to double tap your wall button, but that's just me anyway. But you have your own devoted jump button, and Torrent can jump twice, which is way more useful than your jump. But Torrent can also be used for combat, and I'm gonna try and have each of these sections kind of be in a cowboyish thing, so I'll get into those mechanics. But otherwise, Torrent is fantastic for getting around. Speed, double jump can get you up different structures, cliffs and stuff that you normally would have to run around or find some other way up. Of course, Torrent can't get you everywhere though. There's obviously structures that aren't built in a staircase designed for Torrent to get up to, and you'll have to find other ways to get up there. But Torrent is a fantastic tool to get around. And with Torrent, there is another thing in the open world. These aren't really necessary for explorative reasons of discovering items, but for you getting around. There are these tunnels of air. If you jump in it from the ground level of it, it'll shoot you really high in the air, and you would probably think you will die horribly. If the game doesn't mess up, which in the early game it apparently did more often than what it does now. Apparently some of the patches adjusted some of the problems in that. But if working properly, it'll shoot you up in the air and you can safely land wherever the hell you land. And vice versa, if you're really high up and you see one, you can jump down and land near or in it, and it will not let you die horribly, as long as it's working properly. I have experienced fall death from one of those, so they can be a little off. But apparently they were worse during the launch than they are now. And I think that concludes the explorative topic of Elden Ring. This is going to be a long video, folks. It's a 382-hour game for me to platinum it. I went and probably at least found likely 95% of everything I would at least think. So, we are in for a long video. Strap in. So the next topic I'm going to talk about, let's get into some of the new items. Now, Elden Ring definitely is borrowing things from every Souls game, including Dark Souls 2. There are things from Dark Souls 2. Now, I want to start off with one other thing. I know I keep going to the explorative thing. There is one other thing I should have probably pointed out for the explorative, and that is the stone sword keys. So you will find these gargoyle statues that block you off from getting to either dungeons, or sometimes they're just literally a little room with one item in them. Sometimes it's a boss, sometimes it's a whole new path, a whole new world. Now that is a little mix between item and explorative. But these stone sword keys are everywhere. I have 23 extra ones that I have not found any more that go to. Now, is there the possible chance I might have missed one or two? Probably. But I likely found most of them. So there were definitely a lot of extra ones. But that's another thing you can also get in Exploratories. Also, I love the joke about if this was a Ubisoft game, these would be a microtransaction item, and I really honestly believe that. I really do. But anyway, so new items. Going over the items and stuff, you still have your flasks, which are just called Crimson Tears in this one, but you also get a new type, the Wondrous Physic. Now, this is what you use those teal items I will forward to with the avatars that you kill at minor hidden trees. And there are a lot of them. You basically take 2 teals, put them in the flask, and you get a strange concoction of insanity. It can do all kinds of things. Give you buffs, heal you, give you FP, make you an explosive bomb. What? Give you infinite FP temporary. It can do lots of wondrously amazing things. And it's fun to mix them and test out things you can do. Personally, I mostly made them restore something, usually FP, and give me a buff. But there's a lot of different tactics you can do with it. It's a very nice item. You only get one of it. You don't get multiple or the option to split your extra flasks of your other 2 main types with it. You only get one, so you'll have to do with it. Now, I'd say one of the main important new things are wounds. Now, you have your regular wounds, which are your souls, used for currency, leveling up and that, upgrading, use it for the normal stuff you do. But you also have the great wounds that come from bosses. Now, multiple bosses have great wounds, and you can equip these wounds, and they give you different functionalities to your character. Now, a lot of them really just give you extra HP in varying ways, but not all of them. But that's a main thing of a good half of them, along with doing other things. I'll just go into Godric's and leave the other ones for you to be a mystery. But so Godric's increases all your attributes. So it gives you HP along with all your other stuff. Now, the thing with these great wounds is you need a wound arc. Now, wound arcs you can find in the world and buy from some NPCs. And if you play online, it's basically your humanity, you could say. You get one for helping people kill a boss. So, if you play online, you'll have lots of wound arcs. If you don't play online, you're going to be limited to what the hell is in your world. So, they may be more important depending on if you have online. But when you have a great wound on, you use a wound arc, and you can activate the wound and get its special abilities. I was a little, I liked the idea of the system, but I was kind of disappointed with how many of them didn't do too much crazy stuff other than... Let's put it this way. Let's see. So... So, I would say over half of them have increasing your HP as an attribute of it, with 2 of them giving you a effect that relates to your HP, and then the rest, as few there are, and I'm trying to list too many numbers here to keep it mostly vague, but the rest do other things, which isn't a lot. I would have loved to see a lot more interesting things done with them, but they still can be useful. I didn't use them a whole lot, to be honest, though, because half the time I kind of forgot about them until I got into, I'm pounding my head into the wall, I better use some of these. I mean, at the point I'm at, I have... Holy shit, I have over 300 wound arcs. Holy crap. Yeah, I did way too much online help for wounds, Too much. Now, you got a lot of different buff items. I'm not going to get too nitty-gritty with the buff items, because those are all over the place in that regard. I do want to get into the pot items, though. So, there are 3 type of pots. You have your regular pots, and then you had your... wait a minute, let me make sure I number... They were called ritual pots. That's what they're called, ritual pots. So you have your regular pots, your ritual pots, and your perfumer bottles. So you have 3 different types of bottles. And what's interesting about bottle pot type things is, unlike previous games where they were a stockpiled item, you bought used and go get more. They are different in this. All these bottle pots, they're reusable. They're recyclable. Let's put it that way. They're recyclable. You use the pot and you get the pot back. The big thing is crafting them. You have to craft your pots. You can't buy elemental pots. Now, there are a few times you can buy the empty pots and add them to your collection, but you have to craft them now. And it's about the only main thing that you are forced to craft that you can't buy through some other means when it comes to your usable items. Because most everything else you can find places to buy or find them or get them as drops. But there is no way to get elemental pots without crafting them. So is one main thing that you have to do with the crafting system. Which I guess again is another thing I failed to mention in the open world. Ah, fucking hell. Damn it, there's too much shit in this game. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to gather, and I did grab lots of crap, and admittedly I didn't go too crazy in the crafting, but it is nice to know you can always open your thing and be like, hey, I need a bunch of blood arrows. I don't have blood arrows, so I'm gonna make a bunch with the bones and shit I have. It is a very useful aspect, but yeah, pots was probably the thing I did the most with my craft system, and they can be very powerful. Ritual pots are basically an upgraded regular pot that uses FP and most of the recipes when you throw them, and they add a lot more oomph. Perfumer bottles. I didn't really mess much with perfumer bottles, but they have a bunch of crazy ass shit you can do with them too. So yeah. And since we brought up crafting, yeah, there's a lot of crafting materials to make all your crap. Very handy for all kinds of stuff. Now, there are all multiple items that kind of, how should I say, they kind of bring up Bloodborne kind of vibes. You know, there was no real magic system in Bloodborne. You basically had these usable items that consumed your bullets. And this game kind of brought that back with a few objects that allow you to spawn or make things happen at the cost of FP, but the item in theory is infinite. And you do have many returning things like greases and that can apply buffs to your weaponry. You, of course, have prism stones that are rainbow stones now. You do have a new item, though, the glow stone that helps light up locations, which can also be used weirdly in places that you were never meant to see the bottom of, now that you can see the bottom of some places with them. Of course, using rainbow stone will immediately be like, oh, yeah, that's death. No. Very useful, because there are some places that are really dark. Like, dark in the way that Dark Souls 2 was originally supposed to be. Speaking of which, they brought the lantern from Bloodborne into Elden Ring, putting it to your side with a little light, or the many torches you can get. There are quite a few torches. Now, covenants. I would personally say there was no covenant system, but some people may get nitty-picky and be like, actually there is, and I mean, I get what they mean, but really there is no covenant system, really. Really, they're just talking about the sides of what allegiance of PvP you join, really. But the way covenants were in every other title is non-existent in this. I mean, it's even lesser than what covenants were in Bloodborne. And that was almost barely a thing. Like, they are, like, non-existent. There's no place where you take items and get rewards for that. That is not in this. Which is really weird, because you think that would actually add more to the open world aspect. But it's not there. It's very odd. I thought that I've always, one of the things I always thought was a weakness in a lot of the Souls games is I never felt like they built more onto most of the covenants. They just kind of kept being the same. You join, you do whatever you need to get a bunch of item, give that item 10, 20, 30 times and get all the stuff and then leave and go to another one. Like, I've always wanted them to build more on the Covenant system, and oddly enough, they just got rid of it. It was really weird to me. But since we're talking about the Covenant system, let's talk about the summoning material items. So, to activate online play, you have to use a full calling finger remedy, which again kind of links back to your equivalent of using humanity in that. Using this allows you to use the C summon signs and stuff. Now, it is important to note, outside of NPC invaders, you cannot be invaded by a player unless you have people summoned in your game or you use the Taunter's Tongue. If you use the Taunter's Tongue, that activates invaders indefinitely while it's activated. Now, there are 2 summoning and 2 main invading items outside of the other little randomish invader items. But you have the main finger that allows you to put your classic summon sign down in the location that you put it in, and that's the same thing with the duelist finger. But then you have the effigies. So, the effigies, there are these little effigy statues all over the place. In the open world, in legacy dungeons, the main dungeons, the minor dungeons, the dungeons, they're like all over the fucking place. If you use an effigy, either the golden effigy sign for cooperative play, or the duelist red effigy sign, this puts your sign in front of the effigies. Now, in the beginning, it only did like kind of a area, like it went to multiple, but within a certain sphere of land. At some point, I think it was an update or 2 ago, when you use one, it asks you whether you want to do kneel or fall. So this new option they added in, the fall option, as far as I can tell, is virtually everywhere in the game, practically. If it does have some kind of limitation distance, it's very minor, because I've been summoned in crazy... Hell, I had someone summon me at a fucking... Like, I was like level 80, and somebody summoned me in a dungeon on the continent at the beginning of the game. They must have been backtracking, looking for things they might have missed, and like, oh, here's a dungeon I missed. I'm like, it was crazy, because we would just one-shot, like, the boss was just one-shot, dead. It was funny. But I really like this change, because I could tell you, as I was getting further in the game, I was seeing less people for cooperative play. It was becoming less and less and less and less. It was getting to the point where I'm lucky to even see one person whenever you use the finger calling item. When they did this update, they made it super easy to basically always see people everywhere. Very good change. I think that was good. On top of that, you do have basically the hunter items. So this is the blue Covenant powers, but with no actual Covenant. You just buy them in the main little hub area that you meet most NPCs in from the merchant there. One activates, letting you have hunters summoned into your world, and the other one lets you be summoned as a hunter in other people's world. Again, no Covenant related to it, so other than just PvP and helping people, there was nothing encouraging you to actually participate in the usage of these items. So, now one of the big, and this is apparently huge controversial, like, if there's anything I took from some of the videos and chats and things I've seen looking into the community, because you gotta keep in mind, like, this came out in, like, what, the second month of this year, and I finished it at the beginning of September, because, you know, you gotta keep in mind, I had overtime and shit and stuff, so it made it really hard to fucking do as much play as I can this, but apparently, one of the big controversial things was the spirit ashes. So, early on, depending on your luck, you may have to buy it or be gifted it, depending on your luck of what you do. But you will get the power to summon Spirit Ash. So Spirit Ash are another way of helping you in combat. Now, you still have normal summons. You can summon people. There are NPCs that are available for summon fights. Of course, subjective depending on things you do and that. But on top of that, you have your Spirit Ashes. Now, you can use Spirit Ashes in almost all boss fights. There are a few instances that they won't let you use Spirit Ashes. And to be honest, I don't really remember any of them on top of my head. And another thing is, I didn't really realize you could use Spirit Ashes in boss rooms for a good chunk of the early game. I eventually started realizing, oh, you can use Spirit Ashes in boss rooms. So, majority, you can use them in most boss rooms. Outside in the open world and stuff, some areas allow you to use Spirit Ashes, some areas are not. They mainly need this kind of wound structural thing. I can't remember what they called them. Maybe if I go to the bell, let me find the bell thing real quick. I can't remember, like, yeah, that was like 380 hours ago. I can't really remember what the fuck the structure was called. It's quite a long time ago. Actually, I think it's in the main inventory. Where was the damn bell? There it is. Let's see. This could be used. Oh wait, no, that's not the white bell. That's a wrong type bell. That's someone's vengeful wrath bells. God damn it, where was the bell? There's so many fucking items in this game. It's like, what the hell is... there it is. Spirit calling bell. Let's see... The vicinity of a rebirth monument. That's what it's fucking called. Need a rebirth monument. Because, you know, they always usually have a interesting in-game lore explanation for lots of things, which is something I love about these games. They have everything linked to something in the in-game universe. So you can find these monuments in the open world, but like in dungeons and stuff, like you have to be in the boss room to basically summon them in a boss room or that. So they'll use utility will vary from location and instances and such, and only the host can do it, and they cannot have summoned players in their world. So basically, they're for solo or NPC mode. Now, what's interesting is, you know, like I said, you can't use them when you summon players. Notice, though, I just said what I just said a second ago. What's interesting in this is, so when you summon a player, it disables Torrent and the ability to use Spirit Ashes. You cannot do either of those with players in your world. Interestingly, you can summon NPCs, still use Spirit Ash, and if the fight you're going into allows you to use Torrent, you can use Torrent. Good fucking lord, there was a fight where I actually was able to do all of those, and holy shit, that boss was fucking stomped into the fucking ground. Holy shit. Spirit Ashes can greatly change the game. Early game, depending on how you find it, if you get the freeway, you'll get the Lone Wolves, which is a very nice starting ash. And if you don't, then, well, you're likely going to start off with really crappy ones, because a lot of the early ones are really crappy. Noble Ashes and the Noble Sorcerer. Holy crap. You probably better off asking your grandpa to help you, my friends, because they really bad. But there's a lot of good Spirit Ashes, and some of them can be selective, some of them can be very strategically outside the box thinking, and others are just gigantic fucking tanks, and some of them are just very aggressive. Like, there's a lot of different variety in the Spirit Ash. Now, what's interesting is a lot of the Spirit Ash are mostly enemies that you fight and kill throughout the game. You don't get one of everything, but you do get one of a good chunk of enemies. And then there's a few unique ones that you get that you don't fight as actual enemies, but those are very few, very few. They're very unique And, you know, if you know of who gives you those much later in the game, you know which ones I'm talking about. But otherwise, they're mostly like, they're 99% based on enemies that you fight throughout the game. And many can be very useful, while others can be very subjective. 3 of them I generally used most often were tank types that were very useful for drawing aggro or taking attention off me when it's a multi-fight. And oh boy, when we get into some boss topic, I got a lot of interesting things to talk about with duo fights in this game. And Spirit Ashes, it is important to know, all these Spirit Ashes also, even if they're like, say like for example, the Nobles, you know, they're worthless being used, honestly. You just better, like, if they're literally the only thing you have, they'll follow to be distraction, that's it. But they offer lore, like, you know, just like everything else, they have bits of lore and information that tell you more about the creatures or the individual that you got. And there are some interesting characters that you learn about through Spirit Ashes. And there are 2 different tiers of Spirit Ashes, regular and legendary, that require special upgrade items. And you can upgrade these up to plus, was it plus 10? No, plus 10. I was like, is it 9 or 10? I can't remember. It's 10, 10, 10. So you can make them stronger, better, more effective. Now, crafting-wise, smithing-wise, they really made it very simple. You have smithing stones and slumbering smithing stones, and that's it when it comes to your weapons. And then you have the ghost and grave warts that are for your spirit ash, and golden seeds that are for your flasks, which I have lots of extras of those as well. Now, you will also be getting cookbooks. These are basically recipes for all your crafting. There are many, and there's probably quite a few I probably missed out, which, oof, that's probably going to be a pain in the ass. And then you also get maps, too, because you got open world with a whole map now. So magical and special. Whoa, yeah. And of course, there's different key items. I'm not going to get into specific key items of keys and things that do stuff, because that could be a little spoilish. But there are different key items related to story, events, progression, NPCs, and that, of course. Now, another new system. Now, well, let's go magical quick. You have sorcery and have incantations. There's no spin-off side thing like pyromancy and shit. Now, within these 2 are lots of more categories of spells. You know, you have sorcery, you have space-related shit with stars and stuff, magical draining shit, dark magic, fire magic, storm magic, ice magic, crystal magic, gravity magic, blood magic. There's all kinds of weird death magic. And incantations, you got holy, dark. You got, let's see, lightning, frozen, fire, like dark magic, claw, walk, blood, poison, madness, dragon. Like, there's a lot of different subgroups under these 2 categories. So, and depending on your casting item, some of them buff those different subgroups. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, here's another big, massive thing. Ash of War. Now, if you play Dark Souls 3, most weapons had a ability you could do that usually would consume some FP, and you could do special moves. This Ash of War system is that, but with customization. Most, but not all weapons allow you to change the Ash of War, and different Ash of War can be applied to all or sometimes certain weapon types. Like maybe there's a weapon type that only is for great weapons, or great axes, or great swords only. Or there might be one that's only for shields. So there is that, but in general, a lot of weapons and things can be customized with your Ash of War. And your Ash of Wars are also how you can change elements related to your weapons and such. So it's a dual system of changing your element along with what kind of skill it can pull off. This is a very nice system. It allows a lot of customization and can add a little spin to PvP because you might, oh, there's a great sword, and you're like, oh, actually, wait, I'm not sure what that might actually have a, oh, I don't know what the ability is. Oh deal. That's ooh, that's not good. Oh deal. Yep. Yikes. Now, no. When it comes to your actual gear, there's some special crazy idea stuff like FromSoft usually comes in. Not gonna go into that. But there's no real new weapon types off the top of my head. You still have shields and stuff in that. Torches. Now, torches, I do want to know, like I said, they're all a lot of torches, and they draw different, like, one is inspired from Bloodborne, specifically. But there's also one I really like using. If you watch my playthrough, that when I found it, I basically used it until the end of the game. I really liked it. Now, and this isn't necessarily a change, it's more just retitling. So instead of wings, now you have talismans, but functionally they're basically the same idea. Though you get 4 of them, you can equip them and that. Now it is important to know at the start of the game, though, you have to own the usage of all these, so you don't just get the ability to equip for right from the get-go. So you have to progress through the game and find pouches to be able to get all 4 slots. Now, one thing I do want to mention that's pretty different with some talismans is that there are several talismans that specifically increase stats. Now, these aren't necessarily completely unique, as there were some wings that did that in previous games, but I feel like there's a much interesting, significant difference to them, because those were very minor. These have a lot, like, you're going to level up way higher in this game, likely, than any other Souls game you've played. I want to put on the table, I'm level 157. Now, that's when I went to go fight the secret boss. Now, I don't know, I'm not sure what level I was when I finished the final story boss. I think I added about 30 levels, so I was like 120, 110. But you're gonna level up high in this game. Depending on your skill, you may be way higher, or if you're really good, you might be able to stick around the normal souls, but you're going to be at a huge disadvantage. And these items that increase your stats, they could be immensely a way to stay lower level while getting essentially a dozen or so free levels into your stats. It's a very interesting idea that I feel like is a lot more used in this particular title, But a lot of the usual stuff, like being able to write messages and stuff, a lot of the usual stuff you're familiar with is in this game as well. Like I said, they borrow a lot of ideas. Like, that's why I actually brought up the sword stone keys. You remember those stone dudes in Dark Souls 2? Not something you expected. A lot of people don't even really think about that. I've said that to a few people, and they're like, oh, you're right. That is copied from Dark Souls 2. Oh, no. Because a lot of people always said that's like one of the... And it is a really weird thing, especially in Skull of the... There's something I really hate about Skull of the Four Sins rearrange, is they put a lot of those stone dudes in really odd places that are more annoying. Like, ugh. But I think that's a good general overview of a lot of the new item type stuff in the game. Now, I'd like to go into combat a little bit now. So combat generally, as like the basics, are pretty similar to most of what you're used to in a Souls game. But some of the differences in combat being, for one, if you're a two-handy type person or swap between two hands a lot, that has changed. Now you need to hold triangle and then the button, like your R1 for your main hand, to go in and out of two hand. Now, personally, as a minor gripe, sometimes like I fiddle around my buttons a lot because being a console player, you may have heard the whole meme thing where some people will hold down the one button with their index finger and then use their thumb to use the camera, so that way they have a lot more controllability of the camera while running. Which is something I actually do, and several other people do actually do, and is viewed odd to some people. But as somebody who fumbles around, that sometimes made me end up in a situation where I accidentally conflict my buttons and accidentally go into two-hand with my shield a few times sometimes through my playthrough. But in general, it's not a terrible button change by any means on that. Now, Torrent, we talked about Torrent some during the open world segment. Torrent, of course, as I mentioned, brings a lot of differences. Now, using Torrent, you lose your secondary hand. So you don't have the normal ability to use your offhand. Now, you can use the two-hand ability, which will actually switch your two-hand into your main hand. And when you get off Torrent, it'll leave that in two-hand mode. So if you have something you want to use in your second hand, you can do that to swap between it, but you cannot actually do an actual two-hand ability in Torrent, nor can you shield. Even if you obviously switch to a shield in your main hand, it will be in an attack stance. So you lose all your defensive capabilities that come in turtling form when you're on Torrent. Torrent's all about speed and movement. And it's a very important, more important in my opinion, in Elden Ring, to know when you need to be defensive or more quicker. Like, I found Torrent extremely useful to, like, all the fucking dragons in the game. Dragons, like, incredibly decreased in difficulty fighting them on Torrent. Well, fighting them on land as a person was hugely risky because their huge area of effect of their breath attacks will almost just practically impossible to run. If you're like right on them and they start that breath attack, if you're basically fucked, because you'll be incredibly lucky if you find cover or something to get behind that will block it. Sometimes you can, but you basically can't outrun that from ground zero to the edge. On Torrent, though, you can get where you need to really quick. It's really easy to get around that. But at the same time, like I said, Torrent doesn't have defensive capabilities outside of evasion. So when you need to block something, or you got a heat-seeking thing on your ass, you're fucked. Because Torrent has no rolling. Torrent is completely by movement. If you need iframes or shield, you're screwed on Torrent. Now, the upside is it is pretty quick getting on and off Torrent. There is still some time doing it, but some creative people can get the timing down to switch between Torrent and on foot for situations. I think a very interesting fight I checked out several people's fights with, which is my favorite boss, Wadon. Wadon is on a horse himself, so it kind of makes you feel like going in on a horse would feel appropriate. But he has a lot of attacks that you either need iframes or a decent shield for, and because you're basically going to get fucking bashed in the ground with someone moves on Torrent. And I see a lot of people complain about the fact you can't use Torrent in that fight. That fight, if you go in it without summons, is the kind of fight where you could time getting on and off Torrent for certain situations. Personally, through my playthrough, though, I didn't really do that very often. Mainly, I either stuck with Torrent or stuck without Torrent if I felt like the situation was appropriate for it. Like with Radon, I fought him on foot. But you can fight him on horseback riding with all the NPC summons, too, of that. Now, with the Spirit Ash, as we talked about with the items, you can use these in almost basically every boss room as long as you don't have a human summon in your world. There's only a few rare scenarios where you can't use a spirit summon. And I can't even really remember them off the top of my head, but I semi-recall once or twice not being able to use a spirit summon. And that might even be, like, misremembering something. Because I know there's a few times I accidentally had the co-op item still going, even though I didn't have a summon. And if you have that going, when you go into a boss room, you're screwed. You can't use a Spirit Ash. So it could have even been that situation. But just an off chance there was... because, you know, like I said, this was over 300 hours. This was a huge chunk of the year. So that's a lot of little minor details to try and remember straight. Especially when I played through everything blind and learned over the course of playing. Like, Spirit Ash is, like, if you watch my playthrough, like, I didn't fully understand how Spirit Ashes worked with bosses for a good while. Like, I thought... if you couldn't use them outside of the boss room wouldn't let you use them. I didn't realize you may have the option to use them in a boss room, even though you can't use them in the area outside the boss room. Like, there were things I took time to learn about mechanics and that, so I could be misremembering just some minor detail that's like, oh yeah, it was just the item block or something like that. Blah, 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 blah. Blah. Now, you still have your 4 wings that have been swapped into talismans instead of wings, so you still have a lot of mix and match things to do with that in combat. A good chunk of those are mostly things you're familiar with from previous Souls games. They're pretty similar. Oh, you know, I forgot to mention though, there's also power stancing, apparently, in Elden Ring. I never really tried power stancing in Dark Souls 2, but apparently it's a thing. I've heard some people say it's not as involved as Dark Souls 2, but I didn't try any of that, so... But I will mention that. We'll mention that. We'll mention that. It's like like when I said that this literally took things from all the games, it took things from all the games, seriously. Speaking of which, now, as I mentioned, I haven't played Sekiro. I can't fucking pronounce the damn Japanese one. I haven't played that one yet. But I'm almost entirely safe and sure that the whole stealth mechanic system is probably from that game. So you can crouch down now, finally, and actually do, like, slow walking and hiding. Now... in the beginning, there's a lot of good opportunities to hide in bushes and stuff. But I felt like later in the game, you didn't have that as much. Like, I felt like the more the beginning of the game made more use of stealth and became more of a lesser thing outside of sneaking up people, backstabbing. But, like, hiding in the environment, I feel like, is more of a thing in the beginning. Like, I remember going in the bushes and that at the beginning of Linglaive. Like, there's this forest area you're likely going to go to really early in the game that you'll have a lot of bushes you can hide in. There's a whole bunch of soldiers. It's a good starting area to get used to mobs and stuff in the area. But the stealth mechanic is nice. I do like being able to crouch down. It makes it where you don't have to worry about doing this slow walk and then, oh, for one frame you accidentally ran. Now everything's Elden's coming to mortar you. It makes it a lot easier. And you can still one, like if you hold the O button, you can do a crouching one, which I don't know 100% if that has a more likelihood of being caught than the normal crouching, as opposed to walking or running there. Like, I'm not 100% sure if there's a difference in, like, alertness. That that would require a lot of testing and shit. Which I'm sure somebody will do. Maybe that Limit Break guy does. They do a lot of bizarro tests. Maybe that'll be something to throw at him. It's like, does the alertness Mal walking or running in the crouching mode? Does it at all? But yeah, overall you're likely going to use it to backstab. But there are environmental bushes and things you can hide in. I didn't do it a whole lot outside the beginning of the game, so I can't necessarily comment on how decent that is, to be honest. Because like I said, I didn't do a lot of bush hiding later in the game. There was maybe a few small handful of opportunities I did, but not too many off the top of my head outside of the beginning in Lingrave. Now, casting-wise has changed a lot in a way. Not in like a very big way. It's kind of a more subtle big change. So, you have with a lot of spells where you can hold the spell for a greater effect. This is pretty common with a lot of the attacking spells, where holding it longer makes a stronger version that hits harder, but takes a little more time to charge, and sometimes with a few of them have a few added effects on top of doing that charge. That is a nice little subtle added like difference to some of the spells that can be useful if you want a little bit more oomph, or if you want to just like, no, I don't need the oomph, I need the quickness, I need to shotgun this thing. I think that's a nice little touch with magic. And magic, like, I didn't touch a lot of magic. I did, usually this is what I've been doing a lot more often with new games of the Souls variety. Like, if you've watched my entire experience playing Souls games, you know I was a very casual Souls, a very casual magic peasant in the original Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1 of my playthroughs. Now, sadly, I didn't make content when Demon Souls was brand new, so I don't have a recording of my original playthrough of that, but I do have my original playthrough of Dark Souls 1, and you can see how I really abused magic a lot. And I came to be more of a Red Mage build, where I have usually like faith stuff on the side as assisting magic, with maybe one or two magic casting spells to help some with range. And that's kind of tend to been my kind of build for a while. A shield, a good melee weapon, and a little faith to help on the side. And I was basically that. I do have shit tons of magic, and if DLC ever does come out for Elden Ring, I think I will go with a magic build, because it was interesting seeing how magic was changed up a lot. Like, a lot of the attack spells let you fucking move, like casting and the sorcery branches and stuff. Like, they made it a lot more aggressive of that. So, I imagine a magic build is probably even easier in fucking Elden Ring than any of the other previous Souls games, I imagine. So, It could be safe to say Elden Ring could be even a greater beginner Souls game than Dark Souls 2. That, though, can be a little subjective when it comes to probably what I've seen with the community after starting to, weed and, like, I've watched a few people's, like, opinion things, not necessarily reviews, but like people's rants on both positive and negative things. Mainly I wanted to stick to what things the community didn't like, and I noticed a lot of people complained about the bosses. So there is a noticeable higher aggression level with a lot of the combat in Elden Ring, but it's most especially with bosses. Now, only on for a good, I don't know, maybe a good half of the game, it's probably not too bad, but the later half of the game, you could say the Ornstein and Smog point of the game, I can definitely say there's a good number of bosses that start becoming crazy, like, in a Bloodborne way. So Bloodborne really either had to be good with the pairing system with the gun, or take advantage of the more agile dodging or the mixture of that with the aggression of getting your HP back in the temporary window where you can recover. By the way, there's actually a rune that lets you do that, if I haven't mentioned that away, by the way. But, this is a lot more like Demon and Dark Souls when it comes to blocking and evasion. So, some of this aggression with some of these bosses have thrown some people off, and some people have made very long rants on several bosses who have really long combo windows. Like, there are some very aggressive bosses that attack a lot, and getting that window opportunity to hit them back is a little bit harder. Now, as someone who's more of a totaling tank type player, I rely a lot on blocking and countering, and I love the new counter system, which I haven't actually mentioned yet. So I'll give that as an example now. So the new counter attack system, if you're a tanky type person like me, you block, and when somebody hits you after you blocking, you can now hit R2 and counter back after your shield's been hit. Now, this is a very, very nice system, in my opinion. If you rely a lot on shields, it's counterattacks are pretty powerful. They do help break stances and that, and they're very nice. Very nice indeed. Indeed. But I feel like FromSoft did want to go more in this aggressive direction, but I understand it's not everyone's playstyle. And I will admit there's one boss in particular that I have one little bit of criticism to, because I just thought it was maybe a little too much, but I'll get into that in a little bit of probably more of a spoiler section, since it's a way later boss. I don't want to go too much into the mystery in stuff. Somebody like Radon, who you're going to hear a lot about in the beginning portions of the game, like the common main bosses you're going after, you hear shit tons of. So I don't feel like mentioning them's like, as terrible in that regard. But aggression wise, I can see why it is off-putting for people who mainly have played the Demon Dark Souls-esque titles, or if they played Bloodborne and they feel like it's a little bit more unfair because you don't have some of those advantages on how Bloodborne worked. And I feel like people who got too used to like dodging one or two attacks and then getting a whole bunch of shit in, or mostly the people I feel like that are complaining a lot about some of these longer combos. I mean, it's in no way am I saying that you're unjust. If you're one of the people who complain about that, I'm in no way saying you're unjustified for your complaints of that. But I feel like the crowd that's mostly complaining about that is the crowd that like expects to dodge one or two attacks and to do a whole bunch. I'm not trying to be mean, but it sounds like maybe you're being a little impatient. Now, I do admit there are bosses who do attack a lot. There are bosses who do attack a lot, but I don't feel like that was super annoying in most cases. Though there definitely were a few bosses that were fucking hard as hell that I either sometimes had to find a little more cheese to or come back to later. That in no way am I saying like all the bosses were easy and simple cupcakes and you're just whining and crying at that. I feel like everyone has a valid criticism on Elden Ring here, and it'll be interesting to see if they do DLC, if they take some of that criticism, because that's probably the most, out of like negative criticism kind of videos about mechanics and things, that's probably the most common thing I've seen people complain about, is the real aggressive bosses. Like, a lot of people say, I'd say once you get past the maybe second boss you'll likely fight. Not to, like I said, I don't want to really mention a whole lot of places or how big the world is too much outside of Limgrave, because I don't want to ruin that mystery for thy who are trying to keep a more blind or playthrough. But let's just say after the second likely boss you're going to go towards, once you get around that point in the game, you're going to definitely start seeing a more ramp up of harder bosses that are really aggressive and have a lot more combo hits and stuff. As somebody who was a tank type person, I don't feel like most of those situations were super bad for me. But I think people who relied more on iframe rolling a lot had a lot more problems with bosses like that. But I think it just comes down to really a particular person's playstyle. You know, I've always said this with a lot of Souls games. There's always going to be at least one boss that's solely dedicated to fucking your playstyle. So if you don't have a little red mage in you, in your build, you're likely going to at least pound your head against one boss. And even if you do go in a more multi thing like I usually do, having a little bit of most of everything, that still can end up in that situation, because, you know, the big weakness with a red mage is the fact that it has plentiful options, but is a master of none of them. So that can also include me still, obviously, in that kind of regard. And of course, it just depends when you get your tools, too, because being a big open world game and how you go about tackling, because right off the bat, you could access a pretty decent chunk of the world without even going towards the castle that the game directs you to go towards. You could get a pretty good chunk of the world without going anywhere near Stormvale. And, you know, if you, like, I didn't get to go actually in Stormvale until I explored most of Limgrave. Because I went to the first boss before you can go into Stormvale and got my face punched in multiple times and came back after a few times leveling up. And I just, like, you know, I'm realizing that I think this is just like, go back, explore, stop trying to do what the game just told you to do. Like, I think it was literally there to tell you to go explore some of that. And after I explored basically all Limgrave, I gave it another try, and me and Aaron got past the boss, and I actually got into Stormvale. But I can definitely understand some of the complaints with the bosses, though, to a certain degree. Because there's one in particular that I have a little criticism for, and I'm only a little more understanding of it because it's technically a side boss, not something that's required to finish the game. So in that regards, I could understand that maybe they just wanted to make a really, really fucking hard boss for crazy people. Because that boss I had to fucking cheese with players, because that boss was crazy fucking hard. Like, for a totaling type, like, if you know who I'm talking about, like, even as a total type, you're helping this boss stay alive. And if you play the game, you probably can understand who I'm talking about. So, for me, that boss was really freaking hard. Now, when it comes to, like, item usage, you do have a lot of the usual stuff you found in Souls games, like daggers and clumps of poison and shit and stuff that do stuff. And then you got pots, which they'll, as we mentioned when going through items, there's different tiers of pots now, and they all have a lot of different uses. Probably the thing you're probably going to do the most when it comes to your crafting in the game is making pots. There's a lot of things you can craft, but mostly I bought most of my stuff. I didn't run around and collect too much crap. But I find it ironic, I collected so many bones and never really actually made any real arrows. I just got them for the off chance that if I ever needed to make a whole bunch of arrows, I could. They did add a whole bunch of new usable items so they kind of remind me of like like how Bloodborne didn't really have direct magic, but had like a usable item that used bullets in place of MP. There's a few usable items that do a few things that can throw some projectiles out. And some of the pots also use a little MP as well for a few special things like that too. So you can find a few things like that in the world too that continue off that trait. But one of the things I did find very, 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 very odd was the mimic item is a infinite using item that uses FP. I thought it'd be more of a consumable thing. But that does make it easy where you don't have to buy them, because to be fair, in 3 it was a little bit more annoying if you wanted to use disguises a bit more, so that's not too terrible. It just kind of used to be consumable, but hey. And since we did bring up crafting, that brings up probably a good thing to roll on in. So crafting is one of the big new things on top of a lot of the other stuff. So within the giant open world, you can find lots of materials. Most of them are pretty plentiful and, may vary from place to place or enemies. Like, say, octopus parts and crab eggs, will come from mobs like that. Types of meat come from certain mobs too. Lots of flowers and stuff you can find in varying environments and things. Now, probably one of the things I thought was a really interesting choice was the fact that there are some items that aren't replenishable. So most of these are unique flowers that are, let's see, let me find one. Will. Yeah, like Mikulai's lily, for example. Those are one-time pick. They don't regrow or anything. So there's a few different flowers named after people, and there's also the golden centipedes that also don't replenish. That's another one I know doesn't replenish. Which a few of them make very, the golden centipede, for example, can be used to do the blossom that stops death blight. So that means making that item actually has a hard cap, because there's only so many golden centipedes in the entire world. And same thing with the blossom that stops scarlet rot buildup. The bud that you use to make that is also hard capped. So it's interesting, those different recipes that essentially you can only make so many. Like Mikulai's lily. There's this interesting branch thing you can use that converts enemies to being temporary allies. It can also be used to make the sleep arrows, which was one of the reasons I wanted so many bones, because I was like, oh, I think at some point I might make a bunch of these, because nobody sells them. Nobody sells them. So if you want sleep arrows, you have to find the lilies and make them yourself. But like I said, there's only a hardcore number in the world, so there's only so many of those arrows you can make. Now, some of these things, I think I have 5 the bewitching branches in there. You find some of them. I found the sleep arrows in a few places and stuff. But again, it's a refined number of items. So it's something to keep in mind if you tend to end up doing a lot of crafting, to identify what things are replenishable goods and what things have a limit. Because once you hit that limit or you can't find anymore and it was a resource you had a lot of reliance in, you're going to be in trouble. Now, like, I could definitely tell you with, like, Scarlet Watt, you will be very good finding a spell that cures Scarlet Watt. Because believe me, that was my problem when I first started dealing with Scarlet Watt and had the blossoms. I was like, oh my goodness, I cannot fucking make tons of these. Oh shit. And I still think that's the most dangerous status element. Like Death Blight's not the most horrible thing in my opinion to avoid. It can be a bit annoying to avoid it, but it is only a much more tolerable thing than like Scarlet Watt. Because once you got Scarlet Watt, you're just fucking dying quickly. And if you're in combat, and you don't got any quick way all the way on your hotbar to fucking take care of it, you fucking in real trouble, boy. Because it's time to guzzle down. Like, I remember one boss fight, well, I didn't realize the boss room would be a Scarlet Watt room. And, yeah, it was like, oh, fuck. I don't have anything for Scarlet Watt on me right now. Like, at the end, got the boss killed. But I'm, like drinking my Estus, and I'm like, quick, check the room. Get the fuck out of here. Get to a fire. Get to a grace. But I didn't make shitloads of use of crafting. Like I said, the most I did was made use of the pots, perfumers, and the ritual pots. That's it. The upgrader pots, ritual pots. Yes. Got to make a ritual pot, yeah. But yeah, I'd say outside that and some of the blossoms, I didn't end up doing crap tons with everything. But, oh, and the rainbow stones, of course. I made shit ton of rainbow stones. Good stuff. You know, funny thing, I actually found the thing that allows you to buy rainbow fucking stones at the end of the game. It's like, oh, really? I could have used that ages ago, because every time I needed new ones, I had to go find those damn wound fragments in the world. But there's lots of stuff, and I highly doubt I even found every recipe. There's a lot of recipe books you find in the world that teach you your crafting, and I doubt I found all of them. I'm sure that's probably one of the more common things I probably missed out a lot, because a lot of those you just find on dead corpses and shit laying around or in a few chests and that. So I imagine there's several of those I probably accidentally missed to that. But crafting is definitely a nice option. Like I said, outside of pots, because they changed how pots worked in this. You find a pot, and that pot can be infinitely, like, you'll make the pot, use it, and that pot as an empty item returns to you to make another pot. So you can't just go and buy shitloads of pots like with the knives, buy 999 knives. You can't do that with pots anymore. So pots are likely going to be the most common thing, in my opinion, that you'll likely make. But there's a lot of buffing things too in that. I don't usually mess with a lot of buff items too much, but they're there, pretty usual stuff. But yeah, if you like trying to get a lot of your tools out from the environment, or you used to that kind of thing, you'll feel right at home with a lot of tools and things that you'll have options for in Elden Ring. Now let's talk about multiplayer some, because I did get to do some multiplayer. So it is important to note, multiplayer did change after a certain point through the game. It originally kind of encompassed like a certain slice of the map. So like Limgrave, for example. If I used the multiplayer item in Limgrave, basically affected the Limgrave area, and I'd have it spread around Limgrave. Now, I believe I did explain this in the items and that, but I'll go over it one more time real quick. So you have two summoning options. You have the classic style where you sign is put exactly where the fuck you just dropped it, and that's where you are. And then you have the little statue cross thing that you can have your sign put at all of those within that area. Now, like I said, when you originally use that item, like if I used it in Limgrave, it'd go by all the little statue things I activated in Limgrave, and people could summon me at those if they were in the level range, or if we were using the password system, which makes another Torrent and Elden Ring, where you can match up with friends and then be scaled down if you are higher on them, and that to ensure you don't massively destroy everything in the world willy-nilly, but you still get all your magic and stuff, so you could still have some decent advantages depending on how far back you're getting summoned. Yeah. Now this system was changed, and there was an Invader Duelist version of that sign too. So now you have the option to have it sent near and far when you use the other sign that takes you to the little statues. So if you do a far, I don't know exactly any limitation on it. My experience with it getting summoned is that I was basically getting summoned fucking everywhere. I could be like on the other side of the map and was getting summoned. Hell, there was one time I got summoned to fucking Limgrave. I was like way to the north, and like I got summoned to fucking Limgrave, and I'm like, what the fuck? What's funny is it was a dungeon, like, it was like maybe like the 5th dungeon I done, and I'm like, man, this fucker must have missed this place, and he was just like running around. It's like, oh, here's a dungeon I missed, and it's like, oh, look, some summon signs. Yeah, why not? It was hilarious, like just one shot the fucking boss. It's like, wow. Oh shit! And you can do that with the duelist and the small infantry thing, thingy bob. Yeah, the small golden infantry. Just make sure I'm getting the right terminology. So both the duelist and summon sign can be done that way. So you can still keep it in the small area if for some reason you want to do that, but you can do a fall, which, like I said, I'm not 100% sure if there's any limitation how far out it goes, but it goes out way far, that's for sure. I definitely can confirm that for sure. Now, I didn't do a lot of PvP, but what I definitely did gather from PvP in my experiences, that if you don't have human people in your world, you are not automatically flagged for PvP unless you use a item. It's like a tongue thing. Let me see what that damn thing was called again. But if you don't use it, you can't be invaded. The Taunter's Tongue. If you use the Taunter's Tongue, it's like the fingers where you're opening yourself to invasions. Other than that, you will not have random invasions unless players are in your world. So, I have seen that as a big criticism for PvP people, or people who enjoy invaders coming into the world. And I think one guy said best, why not have an option to toggle it on and off per world? I don't think that would probably be as hard, but I don't know the coding, but I think that would be a nice way, because I can definitely understand if you want to do a playthrough, and even if you're by yourself but you're online but you're in a forum that could be invaded and shit, like I can understand wanting that experience of just because that was the idea of invaders to begin with, is to be this element that you can't predict, because generally there's not really a lot RNG to like enemies and stuff. You go through the environment, the same enemies and shit are gonna be there and stuff in every playthrough of that. There's very well elements in each game of RNG, like the I don't even remember what those creatures were called in Dark Souls 1, that like I think they were called remnants, that can like spawn because a large number of souls dissipated in the area or something. And like, I remember, I think his name was Illusionary Wall. He did a very excellent video explaining all the mechanics of that thing. Holy shit, that dude does a lot of research on this shit too. But generally, things are the same, and that was kind of like the point of the evasion system. Be this mysterious challenge, like, oh shit, this is something I wasn't expecting, and like, am I prepared? Can I take this on? Can I continue down this route and win? Now, I've never been good at PvP. A lot of times I got my ass handed to me a lot of times. So I'm definitely not going to comment a whole lot on PvP combat interactions in general, because I never invaded anyone in Elden Ring yet. It wasn't something I haven't tried yet. Mainly because the NPC I first met that basically gave the idea of PvP, I was concerned about, like, in some of the games, some of those characters are like, oh, now stop murdering these people. These people will hate you because you referred to me or joined me or talked to me or that and stuff. And, I just kind of never, and there's probably that guy that I'm referring to is probably the last NPC I haven't really did anything for. Like, other than that, I've done something with all the other NPCs in the game, so I've actually been thinking of doing a little stream just to do that guy's crap. But PvP experience for me during my playthrough is blood, 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 and blood. Like, I think like 95% of the invaders I met through my playthrough were blood bills. So it became very evident that blood was very powerful. Which, to be fair, when I got a few blood things, I tried out. There's this one nice one that shoots like these flies that induce blood and stuns. That's actually very useful on a few bosses. One in particular that I mentioned I don't generally have a fun experience with. But again, that'll be in spoiler section because that's a way later boss. So, admittedly, blood was interesting, but, yeah, I kind of found PvP kind of boring for my interactions, because just almost everyone seemed to be fucking blood, and that was kind of like one of the reasons I started not being interested in PvP in these games, because it started becoming this big meta thing, like, oh, breaking down so many people using the same spammy shit and stuff. Like, I think Bloodborne was the last entry I really enjoyed PvP in. And I would still say Bloodborne's probably still the most balanced when it comes to PvP. Because the much more limited weapons that had made it a lot easier to balance. Because every other entry, you look at the launch and then, it's near-end life. There's a lot of shit they messed with, and they certainly have done that with Elden Ring, I'm very sure. I know some people complained about, and I luckily only encountered one person, I believe, in my entire playthrough that used it. I think it happened in a mine that's like to the right of Limgrave, actually, I believe, if I remember correctly. But it's like this weird slant, and I know where it comes from because I fought the boss it came from. It's way later in the game, but yeah, it's like this big combo of slashes. Apparently, people would get it and like abuse the hell out of people in PvP. So I guess I got pretty lucky in not meeting a whole bunch of people with that. But apparently, that was also one that was so common that they nerfed it. Apparently, in a more recent patch of that. So. But, yeah, I didn't really do a whole lot of PvP action. Mostly just co-op like I usually like to do these days. But, of course, that still gets you PvP action. Of course, it's just not in a, like, I interacted duels to that. But overall, I didn't really have any particular problems, except... Now, I do want to point out, like, I am playing the PS4 version of Elden Ring, and PS4 and PS5 can play with each other. So, probably the only major problem I had in Elden Ring, oddly enough, came from being summoned or summoning. So, if you play on PS4, I'm sure you've likely seen a game crash before on PS4. Some games obviously are more common than others, but Elden Ring had, and it's still, the last time I still played with people, it still was a issue. And I don't know if it's solely PS4 or if it affects PS5 as well, but sometimes when being summoned or summoning, the game would crash. Now, it would be just the game. The PS4 would still actually work, so you could open the menu and shut down the game and restart it. This is the only major problem in this kind of regard I had with the game, and I don't know why it only happened during summoning or being summoned. I don't know the exact... I never could find a reason. It's something I've actually looked up multiple times. I could not find anything about it in my research, so I wish I could add something here in my limited research of after finishing the game, but I could not find a reason for this. Now, obviously, when looking up crashing, there's usually going to always be somebody with a topic for, like, just about every game about, like, oh, I'm experiencing crashing and that, so it kind of makes it hard to know whether it is the same kind of issue or not in varying situations. So I don't know if it's a big problem on PS5 or not, or other consoles in general, that. I know, like usual though, the PC version launched with lots of problems like usual, so that's nothing different from a FromSoft title. I mean, anyone who's played any of these games on PC can tell you, if you want the beginning experience to be good, you're likely better off buying the console and then buying the PC version later after patches and shit. I know a lot of the big Dark Souls content creators actually do that. Because, I mean, it's just usually the better experience until it gets patched up with that, unless you want to deal with a lot of those problems, which, you know, I'm sure some games launched better than others, so, but I heard Elden Ring had a lot of problems, I heard from my co-worker, so I imagine it was probably not the best in that sense. So let's talk about the NPCs some. So, here's something I have a few little criticisms of. So, you know, you have a much bigger world, but the world is still very much like a lot of the other Souls games. You don't have, like, any big bustling towns of, like... And I'm not necessarily saying I wanted a big bustling town, but it would have been a little nice to see maybe a small encampment or two with some more friendly people that may have some goods or some quests or that. And not, like... I definitely don't want meaningless quests. That's probably the thing I still give a lot of credit to FromSoft, is a lot of the characters and stuff is a lot more meaningful and interesting versus the garbage quests you'll find in a lot of Western open world games. But considering the scale of the game and the cast is still about the size of a, like, traditional Souls game, it feels kind of strange that you just see so little life outside of things that want to murder you. Is that necessarily a horrible thing? Not really. But again, I could have appreciated a little bit, like for example, the merchants you find around the world, which is the closest thing you're going to find to what I'm saying. A little friendly face sells you some stuff, sells a little papers that tell you tips, items, and things. Some useful, some consumable, some just meh stuff that may have some lore on them. Kind of depends on your builds and stuff. But I think it would have been nicer to have a few little encampments of just a few characters or something. Just a little bit more life. But it's a minor complaint, not a horrible, ever-ending complaint. It is just, I cannot emphasize the scale of the world without spoiling it. Like, it's huge. It's so fucking big. It's just amazing how big it is to me. And yet, it's just no areas of life too much. Like, there are NPCs, but, and believe me, because of the huge scale, and this is another criticism I did hear a lot of people complain when looking up some criticism stuff. People complaining about keeping track of NPCs and shit. And I would like to know, like, one of the updates did add a NPC marker. Like, if you encounter an NPC, it puts a marker of that NPC being there on your map. now. So unless you play the physical build unpatched, that exists on the maps now. So you can keep track of NPCs you've encountered. Now, for the NPCs that move around, though, that's still the main criticism of Horde. It's like, how the fuck am I supposed to know they move there or that? NPC movement in these games have to be fair, sometimes not made the most sense of, like, oh yeah, this totally makes sense that they would end up here. To be fair, that's not always the case with all the NPCs. And honestly, I probably, if I didn't spend the time roaming around, double checking for things I've missed or looking for them off screen and mocking them for the live stream, I probably would have missed probably a good half of them, probably, of finishing up the storylines and shit. I probably really would have. It is really easy to miss a lot of these characters if you explore in a certain way without interacting with the NPCs. Now, when I did do research on all the NPCs after I finished the game and stuff, it is nice to know that, say, like, so one character, there's one character who a lot of their interactions with, I went way, like, I killed a boss I could have summoned them with and stuff, but they still show up without bosses, and that is exactly a situation I'm talking about. If you don't go back and re-explore places without a guide or something, if you, it depends if you're doing it blind or with a guide. Obviously, with a guide, then, you know, you're good. But if you're doing it the, how should I say, you know, this ain't everyone's, but, you know, I know I'm definitely not the only one who enjoys the forced playthrough being blind. I know there's a good, decent crowd for that, but that's not everyone's thing. But if you're in that crowd, I definitely can understand it not being fun spending 30 minutes to an hour running around old places that you probably don't really want to explore too much. There's only so many people that enjoy looking around the environment, because that's kind of what I did when I was exploring some of the older areas, looking for things I may have missed, or checking out some of the environment and kind of getting some ideas on the story there, because I really did enjoy putting the story together in this. So it did give me an excuse to kind of think, like, take things I've learned back to older areas and kind of place some of the info and kind of think about some of that, because I always love a lot of the world building FromSoft does. They do very well, in my opinion. They do it very well. Is it all on purpose? You know, some people give them a lot of credit in that regard. Be like, oh yeah, everything, every leaf and plant and tree has meaning in its placement. Like, I'm not that up from, I'm not that up from Soft's ass about it, but I do feel like they do put at least a really good amount of thought behind most placement of things in their games. But I can understand, like I said, with the NPCs, it's easy to lose them in that. So that's a bit of a subjective thing. I think that's maybe another reason it could have been nice to have little encampments with a few, like, where the merchants, not necessarily all of them, because there's a few interesting hidden ones. Like, there's one that's, like, starving to death, hiding from, like, the enemies in the area and that I thought was interesting. There's a prisoner one you can find way late in the game that's interesting as well. But it would have been interesting if maybe a few, like, locations where there's merchants, maybe there's a little band. Maybe it could have been like a kind of a gossip situation. Maybe some of them could tell you info, be like, oh, I saw a giant pot man walk down that way there. That could have been an idea to maybe help a little bit with NPC locating a little bit. Not be entirely accurate, you know, and not saying like, oh, they went that way when they went that way, but, you know, could give you a little idea. It's like, I think they heading east, and then, like, I think that could have been a thing that maybe helped with that, but again, that just goes to a minor complaint of, I would have liked to see a few little encampments. Not necessarily a shitload of new quests or things attached to them, but could have been useful for maybe little infos or rumors or few interesting ideas possibly, but again, minor, very minor. Now, I did like all the NPCs though. They're pretty interesting cast of weirdos and shit like usual, and I did enjoy them. Some of them had some pretty horrible fates though. Some of them lead to a lot of questions, like one particular. One in particular you fight, I'm still really kind of debating why they stood in my way of becoming Elden Lord. Very, like, there's a lot of very interesting lore stuff with different ones. So I definitely recommend checking out the character storylines. But the game does give you ample time to keep people moving forward for the most part. I'm sure there's ways of breaking quests and that, but overall, looking them up, it seems like what usually seems to happen is either A, like if you went through an area that NPC will go to, either A, they skip over it, or B, they'll be there and you have to go there and talk to them and then they move to the next section. Seems to be the common thing with some of the different places that they show up, so it doesn't seem to totally terminate their quest, though there probably is a point in the game near the end where it likely starts locking in NPCs to certain things, probably due to, in-game events, but again, there's still a lot of things to research and know, and things that happen, like, little minor things. It's a big game, lots of weird things. I've just been watching, like, videos like mystery found stuff, bugs and things. Like, I spent months not watching any of the shit while people have been making. That's probably the only nice thing is, like, I've had a lot of content to watch now because so many channels have made so much crap on this over the last several months. But I enjoy the NPCs. I definitely can understand some of the criticisms with them being a big open world now and trying to get all of them. But I think that's kind of what makes them special still, even in this, is finding them and interacting with them is kind of part of the reward. I can understand somebody not really agreeing with that, but I think it's kind of the thing where you're not necessarily meant to find, like, a lot of Western players who play like things like Assassin's Creed and shit are really used to either just doing the story and being done with it or doing everything. And I feel like the people who want to do everything are the majority of the people complaining about that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I hate it when I miss, like, I have a pretty decent track record of doing most NPC quest lines and getting those stories to some conclusion, usually in my blind playthrough. But, I've had my, like, there was a character in Dark Souls 3 that had a little bit, like, I did get them to the end, but I kind of had one of the more unfortunate endings to the quest versus a more gallant one, which I got in my DLC one of Dark Souls 3. And I understand that feeling of missing out on something. I can understand that. Especially this being a really long game. Holy crap. But I think it's just kind of the attention. Sometimes can't always like everything about how the creator goes about. Sometimes you just have to play ball. Now, something else to note in the physical build in the interest of the disc, while it's likely that pretty much the only Souls game that hasn't gotten a new disc version with added content being on it was the English Bloodborne. PAL in Japan did get one. But if DLC happens for Elden Ring, it's very likely it will probably get a new printing which will solve this problem, but that doesn't exist at the time of this video. So the physical build on the disc, out of interest for those with no online or those down the road when the online doesn't exist anymore. And that day will happen one day, likely. I mean, look at Demon Souls. bye bye. I mean, we did get the remake and there was the fan server, but still, the point is, servers go down and sometimes they might go back up with some luck, help, and determination, but other times they just die out. So it's a bit of a shame, But for the interest of the physical build, so we did have a test runner who went over an offline playthrough with no patches, and it was kind of curious to see the kind of things they actually encountered. There were a lot of differences in some smaller things, but nothing that hindered them from completing the game. Essentially, to go over some of their cliff notes, they were able to get platinum, get all the endings and everything, so they were able to have the majority of the game still. But there were some things. There was some broken side quests, some quest lines that aren't fully finished, or even some regards of added, as there was an NPC and an invader added via patches, let alone just finishing up quest lines related to other NPCs. There are a few oddities about some things that happen in the game. Inventory items, lore and things, and names and stuff are very different with some things. So they did change, and like if you watch some lore videos, I've seen some reference some text from the non-patched game and that. So there was a lot of little tidbit things like that were different. Some are interesting, some of that mistranslations and stuff. There's a few still localization of old things that didn't fully get finished. There are environmental details that are different, and some of these were through there were patches that have changed some things when it comes to like clipping and things. But there are also oddities where like they encountered chests that are empty, environmental spots that are odd, items that are in different locations. Like, those are all very odd, strange things. They also found a site of grace that wasn't even there, so they added one, at least one they noticed to that. That's very, very, very odd. They also noticed that there was a very odd, with one of the later NPCs, there was a lot of dialogue with him that's messed up near the end, where it'll say, let's see, drops a talisman literally named question mark, accessory name question mark. Very, very odd little thing there, but so probably the biggest thing is several NPCs aren't fully realized to their full potential in the patched version of Elden Ring. Of course, other minor fixes and adjustments and stuff they've done in later patches as well will obviously be non and void as well. So it is a capable and a, for the most part, decent build still, but there are still some issues and stuff. So I thought it was important to point that out for anyone interested in the physical build. But like I said, DLC is very likely, which means likely a new version. This is the best-selling game. It would just be absolutely insane in a way not to do both to get even more money and higher numbers and stuff. It just would be crazy, but you never know. Miyazaki is a crazy fucker, right? And so our journey is coming to a close here at the Lands Between. It's been quite a load, hasn't it? This review has taken several segments of time to do in between a lot of real life things that have been going on behind the scenes. Just like how playing through this game took such a long time. But all good things must come to an end, and while I hold my review nowhere close to many, many people who do far greater work than I do, I still must come to an end indeed. So let's get on with it. What is the value of Elden Ring? If you know me and what I've thought about the price increase to $70, you will know I do not hold a lot of games feeling the value of that. But if Elden Ring was $70, probably upon picking it up, I would probably mumble and grumble. But I think after finishing it, I would probably say this is probably going to be one of the few games I ever think would have been fine being $70. But this is a $60 game. And at this point, after winning the video game awards and everything, you could get it cheaper than all these AAA games that are, we need to be $70 to exist. And then they whine and cry as a Japanese company across the pond is kicking their moles, money, and income and everything into a gutter. But I'm going to give Elden Ring $70. It will probably remain as one of the few, if only, games I will probably ever give this fucking honor of. But in a realistic sense, you're going to find Elden Ring all over the place when it comes to prices. It's been out for almost a year now, and it's had many discounts both on console and PC and that. And it still has new content being added, as I showed clips of said new content, the PvP Arena mode, and DLC keeps being something in the whispers of the community, which I still think is very strong odds of coming out. Whether it be tomorrow or a year down the road is the unknown part of it, in my opinion. If you watched this entire review, which is likely to be the longest, if not one of my longest videos to do in a review, thank you so much. I know I am a blithering-winded, nonsensical, unorganized person when it comes to my thoughts, but thank you for making it this far. If you feel like you learned anything interesting at all, feel free to leave a like. And if you feel like you learned nothing at all, feel free to leave a dislike guilt-free. And with that, of course, we must have the final section, as we usually end, spoilers. My thoughts on the story. Now, I'm not going to make this really big. There's a lot of things we could sit here and talk about when it comes to the story. But I feel like before I start watching a whole lot of the lore videos and stuff being tainted by other people's thoughts and stuff, I wanted to at least get the general bits that I think will be upon opinion pieces. So, what is the point of Elden Ring? To become the Elden Lord, from the player killer's perspective, at least. But I also think, at a certain degree, it comes what is going on with Queen Marika. What did she want? What did she desire? What was it that was ultimately their goal? That is one of the ultimate things I'm going to ultimately put here. But let's go over a few things. First thing, I want to say that, in my opinion, it seems quite clear that Elden Ring takes place over many years. It could be thousands of years. I think we're looking at a decaying world. A history, like an entire history possibly of a world. Its cultures clashing. That we saw that Queen Marika had taken a world from a pre-existing culture before hers. So to me, it's kind of like we're seeing different ages of dynasties and that rise and fall, you know. So I full wholly expect when I start watching lore videos that there likely will be interesting timelines in those degrees, putting these different cultures into different positions in the timeline. And I think that would be very interesting. Very, 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 very interesting. So, some of the things to go over. Tarnished. We watched the opening. And I have to say, you know, the Tarnished are very bizarre. They were banished from the lands between, and you come back being essentially dead. Like, you're hollows. Those who are dead but yet live. Including the former Elden Lord. Of the human generations of them, at least. I think throughout the story, this culture of gold, I think Queen Malika couldn't stand being a god anymore. I'm sure there will be many different interpretations, because there's a lot of interestingly conflicting info that could be interpreted in a few different ways. But my conclusion, I think, is that Queen Malika, at some point, wanted out. Whether it be like, oh, everyone I know and love is dying around me, or I'm just sick of all this shit, or... I think Queen Malika wanted out. I think she wanted to peace out of being this god for the Golden Order and that. And I think the events that took place over all these years were all things that led to this moment of wanting to stop this. Now, the whole thing with Wadigan... Not Wadigan... Yeah, Wadigan... Man, I tell you, why is everyone's name so similar? I think he is a mimic to you, I think. Like, looking at his storyline and the part he played in knowing the grand secret of how he interacted with the world net, I think ultimately he was a separate mind and was created to fulfill a godly role. Because when you look at the people at the underground and that, you know, they were trying to create like a god. And I think that was their attempt, or possibly Queen Malika was maybe trying to make a replacement for herself. Again, could be different interpretations, but I think it's quite likely they're a mimic to you. That they are a man-made god. Now, what led to the two of them becoming one entity? Because it's very clear from one dialogue option that you get at the Grace before the capital, before getting to the Eden Tree. It's very clear from the dialogue box, though, that there was a point in time where they were not one entity, which was something that was confusing to me when first finding out about the secret on how that all worked. So there was a time where they were separate and a time where they became one. And it's quite clear in the final battle there is a point that they became one, because they are one. They swap between each other. And it's interesting to see how it seems pretty clear the two don't agree on what's going on in the world. One wants to keep the Golden Order in power, and the other quite clearly seemed to want to destroy it. Regardless of even if you think it's because she wanted to stop being a god or some other shenanigans, Queen Malika, without a doubt, shadowed the Elden Wing. Why is the big question that will likely continue over the years to be questioned. There will be very interesting stuff, I imagine, coming out. I really do feel. But I think the greatest mystery that still baffles me is the Black Knives. Whose alliance were they? Who were they truly sided with? That's the hardest question, in my opinion, because there doesn't seem to be a clear answer. They worked with Wani, but yet they killed her teammates. They were all throughout the game. I just find it very baffling whose side, if any side. Maybe they were just fucking crazy. It's hard to say. That's probably going to be the most interesting thing to me to check out in theories. And one of the reasons I wanted to give my thoughts on some of the story before dwelling into that, because it could, change how I interpreted the story, and then you don't get to hear that idea. I think the last main thing I'd like to go over is Gideon. Gideon the All-Knowing. Probably one of the more baffling NPCs. While most other NPC characters you interact with, I think, are pretty understandable to understand what they were doing, going through, and their fates and such. I think Gideon is one of the more confusing. It's very clear that Gideon is not a good person. You can be left in a strange, I don't trust your position, but by the end of the game, it's pretty clear that Gideon is not a trustworthy person. That Gideon has very personal and self-absorbed reasons of doing what he's doing. But what I think is quite baffling about Gideon is his decision to stop anyone from becoming Elden Lord. At the beginning, it seemed obvious that he himself considered himself amongst those who wanted to become the Elden Lord. So it was very baffling at the end of the game to see him in a position where it seemed more like he wanted to make sure nobody became Elden Lord, including himself. And his dying dialogue seems to indicate that, because he'll say that a man cannot kill a god. That he personally believes it's not possible for the Tarnished to do such. And that leads to my thoughts on what led to this change. Because I think he personally really did want to become Elden Lord in the beginning. So what changed in Gideon? You told him things. You told him information. And when you get that information to him, he gives you a lot of spells. And these spells tell you very interesting lore that he had communicated with the fingers. I think that in Gideon's attempt to understand Queen Marika's desire, why she did what she was doing, I think Gideon either greatly feared what he saw, or he greatly misunderstood what he thinks Queen Marika wanted. As he does say in his dialogue that she had great aspects for them, or something along that line. I think Gideon misunderstood what Queen Marika wanted. Or maybe he did understand it properly. It's hard to say, but whatever, he saw some form of information. Whether he misinterpreted or accurately knew exactly what she wanted, and he went with that. Which is interesting, because, I mean, becoming Elden Lord, I would imagine, would have probably been defying Queen Marika anyway. So, especially with stuff like, well, he didn't even give a shit about you burning the tree down anyway. So heresy didn't seem like it was off the table for him. And again, it'll be something I feel very interested in seeing what people's ideas of the story in that will be with the title. But I think in general, that covers most of the main big things that will likely have a lot of splintered off opinions. I'm sure there will be lots of other curious bits, of course. There's a big world, a lot of different cultures, characters, both ones you meet and ones told through item descriptions. I'm sure there will be many interesting stories to be seen. But ultimately, I think the biggest thing that I'm curious to see is about who the Black Knives ultimately served, or whose goals, or what their own goals were. Because they are probably the most confusing thing, in my opinion, in the story, even beyond what could be interpreted as different reasons for Queen Malika's destruction of the Elden Ring. But anyway, again, those are my thoughts on Elden Ring. Long ass fucking video, I know. Thank you everyone for joining, and I hope you had a good Christmas and a happy New Year. And until next time, I'll see you at the Proving Ground.